Well, I'd like to welcome everyone. Thank everybody for taking some time out of your day. My name is we've been holding these kind of topical webinars occasionally here, and this one in particular was scheduled originally for when when the COVID nightmare happened a few months ago. So had to reschedule it, but today we're really excited to have a couple of great panelists. We've got with me, I'm the Chief Business Officer over here at TradePending. We've got George Nenni, industry veteran. He'll talk a little bit about himself later, founder over at Generations Digital. I'll be talking to George a little bit about just some of the backing data that we're seeing and the trends that we've seen kind of coming out of this kind of strange lockdown phase, and really interesting insights George's going to bring. And then in the real world format, how do you implement, how do you execute on a digital retailing tool within your dealership? We're going to get some real world insights from the brilliance of Paul Schnell, Director of Digital Marketing over at Alpha Auto Group. To get started, though, just a couple of housekeeping items. We're going to be recording today's webinar. If you have to leave for some reason, you'll automatically be sent the recording. And as well, you'll notice that you're on mute. It's not because we don't want to hear from you. It's just trying to be respectful of the format here. If you have questions or insights or comments, please drop them into that chat box and we will gather them up for the end of the webinar. So today, we're going to kind of look at, three different perspectives, look at kind of a high level of what's going on in the industry, what we're seeing from our data set over here at TradePending, what we're seeing in that data set in regards to digital retailing, and how to create that good experience between what happens online and in person, and look into the crystal ball a little bit and see what maybe the future holds for digital retailing. So I'll get us started today because our Snap tool, our script lives on dealerships' websites. We do get a little bit of an insight into website traffic. We see users and sessions, and we see upticks and trends as well. And what we saw coming out of, or all the way back to week one of COVID-19 was, just a fall off the cliff, really extreme downward trend in usage. And then reflexively, it would seem an incredible uptick of week over week traffic growth. And so, what can we attribute this to? Well, a lot of factors probably at play here. OEM incentives, dealers being forced in a good way to have consumers do more online. And then also just, hey, people had leases they need to return. They had stimulus checks. Maybe they're not taking a summer vacation now, and they have a little bit more cash laying around. And hey, maybe it's time to pick up a new set of wheels. But website traffic pre-COVID levels, and we saw an incredible amount of trade-in leads increase from week one, and has remained pretty steady at those levels. So a lot of activity. We're seeing dealers be really hungry and aggressive in their used car strategies, using every opportunity they can to get inventory, with now scarcity being a big deal with used car inventory. Along with that, just some interesting data and a little bit of insight here. This story is really interesting, that conversion rates, we did go up, and that's an expression of our leads divided by total number of users. But form completion is also kind of settled, kind of back down to where it was pre-COVID. But we saw a huge, 2% increase in overall form completion, just people who are going into our trade tool and then completing the whole process. Really kind of fascinating to look back over our shoulder now and kind of hopefully project for a little bit more normalized rest of the year here. But trend wise, we're seeing that kind of return to normalcy. So kicking it over to our friend George here. George, get us started here. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in automotive, and what you're doing over at Generations Digital.
Sure, glad to. Thank you, Joe. So I started in the car business back in '93 with what was a family business back in those days. So Dealer Specialties was started by two of my older brothers in '89. I joined as really the first employee in '93, and we franchised all across the country from '94 to 2000. Really covered the country with franchises. Was acquired by Trader Publishing, who later became Dominion. They made a bunch of other acquisitions. I ran digital and CRM operations for them until August of 2017 when I left to start Generations Digital and really to become dealer advocates around digital marketing. So we don't sell really anything. We help dealers to measure what works and what doesn't, and really help educate them to be better consumers of digital marketing.
Got it. Got it. A lot of background, a lot of mending together, and as we'll see, just a tremendous talent in the industry as well. So part of your, and I love this slide. I mean, talk a little bit about how accountability works, what you see in the tools out there, the ones that allow that insight, and ones that don't.
Yeah, and this is a great base level question for any dealer who's considering any digital retailing solution or trade solution or any, for that matter, any plug-in widget for a website, chat, whatever it would be. That tool must be able to be counted in Google Analytics. And the way it's counted is this fancy word. You can see it in capital E there, events in GA. Just ask your provider. Just say, do you guys fire events in Google Analytics? And if that answer is yes, it will unlock a huge new level of transparency for the dealer to be able to count those conversions against different traffic sources. And it's funny, sometimes you get strange looks from some of these providers where they say, well, George, we don't need to fire events in Google Analytics. We've got our own reporting tool. And you try to help them connect the dots to say, look, our goal is to connect the traffic, the campaign, the paid keyword to that conversion metric. And so without really connecting them in Google Analytics, you can't grade the quality of your traffic, the quality of your campaigns to say what's working and what's not. Where did all of our trade leads come from last month? Well, here, these came from organic search. These came from paid Facebook ads. These came from this paid keyword we bought, and so on. So that connection really, if they can't provide that, then, run in the other direction. There's other solutions that'll take care of you.
I know it does that. As a matter of fact. So yeah, that was one of our initial things, was that trade tools originally in these kind of iframes were just totally black boxes, right? There was no transparency into what was happening in there from a attribution standpoint. So let's get into some nitty gritty here. And George, you're way smarter than me. So I'm going to let you talk through some of these charts you have laid in here.
Yeah, so this is, dealers need to have multiple conversion methods on their website. And it's not a matter of, the more conversion methods or the more calls to action you have, the better. You need to think in terms of keeping your user experience and user interface nice and clean. But if you have areas where people can submit lead forms, there are, of course, phone numbers for click to call, chat, trade-in leads and digital retail leads. Tracking those individually to be able to see, where am I getting most of my conversions? For most dealers, this is pretty typical, right? Click to call is one of the most common conversion methods, but you can see all the other methods there. When we measured our dealers pre-pandemic and then post-crisis, with zero exceptions, anyone that had a trade tool or a digital retailing tool saw increased conversions from those during that pandemic. So what that tells us is that the consumers, we've always known that they like those tools and they interact with those tools, but increasingly in a time when they know they're not going to visit the dealership and they get the opportunity to do upfront work, apply for a loan, get a number on their car for trade, whatever it is, they will gravitate to those tools. And I'll show you some slides later. They'll also come back. We see that those are the more engaged visitors that will come back to your store and convert, through other methods also.
Yeah, it's really interesting because of our API partnerships. We track, we're powering literally thousands of digital retailing tools out there as regards to trade values. So we're integrated in those, and we saw, not just more dealer adoption of those digital retailing tools, but also an incredible spike in API calls, i.e., consumers doing that process. So even in a small way, we saw that definitely jump up over the last few months.
You bet.
All right, let's talk about this daily performance by channel.
Yeah, so we created this report for the crisis just because, every morning when we woke up, we wanted to see how all our dealers were doing in terms of traffic and conversions. And so every point on this graph is a day, and so it starts February 1st and runs until, a few days ago. The top section is all traffic. The bottom section is all about conversions. Those conversions, as we showed you on the last slide, lead forms, chats, trade, click to call, whatever it is. And if you should just focus on the gold for this exercise. The gold that you see in the graphs is organic search. And why focus on that? I felt like during the pandemic, if we really wanted to get a good sense for our shoppers coming back to the table, our shoppers coming back to the stores, we should look at the most natural, free, organic traffic that the dealer gets, and that's that gold traffic. So the big inflection point that we see, and I think this was from a dealer group in the Midwest, around March 11th is when really consumers started diving into the foxholes, and you can see traffic in the gold there around March 11th start to dip down. But then around the 22nd, and this ties with your earlier slide too, Joe, where you were showing where your trades start increasing, you can see traffic start to come back, and then all the way up until where we are now. Most dealers that we work with, May was a great month in terms of sales and conversions, also for traffic, and June is starting off nice and strong. The bottom section you can see there with the conversions, those were a little more slow to come back. And so we saw during late March and April an interesting phenomenon, something you can measure in Google Analytics. It's very easy. It's called time lag. If you go in the conversions menu and you hunt around, I think it's under multi-channel funnel conversions, there's a choice called time lag. That shows you the number of days from when shoppers first came to your site to when they converted. And so we saw that begin to lengthen. And we were watching that for a number of dealers that their shoppers were shopping longer and then converting later. And so I think that also had to do, I think the digital retailing tools played well in that, because the consumers, again, wanted to shop longer, wanted to get more information up front, and then converting sort of a little further downstream.
Interesting. Requiring a little bit of patience on the dealer's part, maybe.
Yes. Yep.
All right. So about the quality of something that comes up, the quality of those who are DR shoppers, or really any kind of conversion point is dubious. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So this screen here, and especially for anybody who's using Google Analytics and feels comfortable with the tool or wants to learn more about the tool, if you got nothing else from my slides today, you get this technique under your belt, because it will unlock also a huge level of transparency. If you see the little blue dots up at the top, it says sessions all users. That's the blue line. The orange line is, this is just one of the digital retailing tools out there, AutoFi in orange, and then green is TradePending, superlatives click in this case. And so building segments for anyone that interacts with your digital retailing tool. So for this example, this was people that clicked on the TradePending superlatives click, or people that interacted with the AutoFi tool. Once you build segments in Google Analytics, it's a one-time thing. It's very easy to do. You can then measure that traffic's propensity to do certain things. You may measure that traffic's tendency to convert, or that tendency to come back on subsequent visits, and so on. And so that one tool will allow you to run a lot of different slices and dices. But if you look at this, and for instance, if you look at AutoFi or look at the superlatives clicks, you can see, look at pages per session. It's double the normal all users. Look at time on site, average session duration, double, even triple, the normal website engagement. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us, for one thing, our very best shoppers, our very most engaged shoppers are using these tools. And so we want to pay attention to that. The tendency to convert to a lead is multiple fold, for once they click on those tools. And so the other lesson here, I think, is important. When dealers are measuring digital retailing tools, don't just measure the conversions that come out the other end. You have to also measure the quality of the shopping engagement. And you should measure the tendency for these people who use digital retailing tools to also convert through chat or click to call or other methods, right? So they don't necessarily always convert through those digital retailing tools. Sometimes they bounce around and then just show up, or maybe convert through other methods. And so really powerful. Sounds complicated, not at all. Really easy to do. I can send you instructions if anybody wants to ping me, but a good step.
Fantastic. Yeah. And the interesting thing about superlatives is that it is it's not a lead gen product, right? It is a dynamic merchandising product, but even still those that interact with it, it really uncovers a higher quality shopper. Do you remember what your, the propensity to return was for superlatives?
I think it may be on the next slide. I don't know if I have superlatives, but I know we have the cohort. There it is. And yeah, that's superlatives. So all I really did, folks, once you create those segments, you can see the audience menu over there on the left. If you just simply click on cohort analysis, this is a one button, this is a one-click report, right? Sounds super complicated. It's just a couple clicks. And cohort analysis is a really complicated way of saying tendency to return to the website, right? So that's really what we're measuring, the tendency for this traffic to return. So when we look at month 0, we've got 100%, right? So that makes sense. 100% of our people that came in month 0, returned in month 0. They were already there. Month 1 is the subsequent month 2, and so on. So you can see the all users in month 1, 4.6% tend to come back. However, if they use the Autify tool, or if they use the TradePending superlatives, or if they click on the superlatives click, they have a higher tendency than to return in subsequent visits. And so, what does that say to me? They like the tool, right? If they were turned off by it, you would see a much drastically lower engagement on return visits.
Totally. It's great stuff, George. So where do you think, and I'll pose this up later to Paul, but what's your kind of view on all this rapid adoption? Do you think that these dealers are going to stick around, continue to utilize, and where do you see this heading?
Yeah, I would say, the future of digital retailing, I think, is continued growth, continued adoption. But I think it's also important. So I remember reading a quote early on in the pandemic from Jennifer Suzuki that really stuck with me. She said something like, sell to your customers the way they're telling you they want to buy. Or so I probably chopped that up, but listen to your customers, ask them how they're looking to buy and what additional tools or how they enjoyed the interaction on your site. Maybe heat map some of the tools you have on your site to see how people are interacting with it. But it needs to be a fluid kind of dynamic conversation. We don't want to overwhelm them with pop-ups and calls to action and these sort of things, but we do want to have a nice logical workflow that not only matches the consumer's desire, but also matches the dealership's ability and the dealership's internal processes ability to kind of hand that, to take that handoff, right? If the consumer goes online and spends an hour applying for, a loan and getting a number on their car and shopping and picking out their favorite, vehicle, and then arriving on the lot to say, hey, let's just start over. It's much easier. I can't pull up your record or whatever that is. Then there's a huge disconnect, and the consumer not only knows that they wasted time, but they know the online and the offline experience is not connected. So those pieces for me are big.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect. Thank you so much for that kind of dive there, George. And if you, I've sat in on a couple of sessions with George, and what he can kind of surface in GA is just tremendously valuable data. Selfishly for our own products often, but overall, just a great resource. And appreciate you being on, man.
Sure, thank you.
And that's actually a really great, seg into our discussion with Paul. Paul, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, how you got into auto, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Well, Paul Schnell, I've been doing this for this side of the business for about a dozen years, I would guess. Been around for a while, seen a lot of cool changes and things like that in our business. And I really do appreciate George being here. My favorite part about this job, I think, is you get to work with both sides of your brain. You get to work with the creative side, and you get to work with the analytical side. So it's great to find analytics experts like George that can dig into this data and help bring out some insights that we may be missing. In fact, I made a couple notes during this thing. So I would say that my focus, my expertise is on customer experience, both online and in the store. Which kind of goes right to the first question here. But I have stores in the U.S. and Canada, and I just absolutely love this business. I love every piece of it, and I'm a constant student of this business. So I really appreciate the 40 some odd people that decided to get on this call today and listen into what little old me has to say.
Well, I think that there are those that definitely are looking forward in the industry, and I think you're one of them. That really is a standout. So, to kind of back to what George was talking about, what's your you know, I remember when internet leads first became a thing, that there was this initial frustration that, you know, there was just massive disconnect between, you know, what a consumer was doing on the website, sending clear signals to that they were interested in a vehicle or what have you, and then at the store level, the handoff would just be a total mess. And you know, what's your kind of view on that? Taking a mega lead, you know, a digital retailing lead, and not blowing that up in the in-person experience.
Yeah, like it's magnified now, right? Because there's more information. So years ago, customers give their contact information. Maybe they could ask a question and never know what to expect in return. And then people learned what to expect and they quit filling out lead forms, right? So we now that's even further with digital retailing, especially depending on where you ask for customer information in the process. You know, they kind of, some of that reluctance dissolves and we get more information. And so I'm going to change that word marry to mirror. And, you know, for me, it's about having a customer experience and having a digital retailing tool that are very parallel, that run kind of like, I want my online experience to be pretty similar to what the in-store experience is going to be. So we want them to work with one person. We want to be transparent about pricing and transaction details and those kind of things. So as a customer moves along, at any point that they stop and they jump to becoming a showroom customer, that we can pick up where they left off and continue the process without interruption. That's a huge challenge, and most of us aren't doing it right. In fact, we get it wrong often, but that's the biggest thing for us to work on, because the smoother that is, regardless of where the customer is at in their transaction, the better it is for them and the better success rate we have in completing transaction.
So have you tried any DR tactics that just haven't worked as planned?
Yeah, we tried a lot of things that didn't work. You know, we initially thought, you know, kind of going into the product or process conversation or the handoff conversation, you know, we initially tried to define where the handoff point was going to be. So when we switched on digital retailing, we immediately got a ton of people using the tools. But we made an assumption that there were kind of two kinds of people, right? There were some that were going to, you know, play around with things, and then there were going to be some that really got involved and really, you know, looked like a car shopper. And we were going to kind of define that, and we were going to say anybody who went into the trade process, or anybody who looked at who picked a bank for their choice for financing, any of those kind of things, that we would say, okay, those leads we're going to hand off to a salesperson, and everything else is going to get handled by the BDC. And what we found very quickly is all of our assumptions were wrong, and that it was just as likely that somebody who was playing around with a trade was very interested in buying a car, and somebody that was playing around with payments was 16 years old and years from being able to buy a car. So we did a lot of things wrong to begin with.
Interesting. So don't assume too much, right?
Definitely not. But you know, I think the biggest thing that we have to do, so it's just like any other kind of digital marketing we do, right? We guess at intent, at what the customer says in a search, for instance, and we try and land those people on the right pages on our website, right? Sometimes we get it wrong and sometimes we get it right. So this is the same thing, you know, and the biggest thing that we can do is, instead of guessing at intent, is to provide tools that allow people to tell us what their intent is. So, you know, big thing for us is having chat sit right on top of digital retailing. I'm amazed at the number of digital retail tools that don't either connect to your existing chat or have a separate chat tool, so that customers can give us more information about what they're looking for. We have less of a guess at their intent. We know what their intent is, and we know the best way to match that person up with the right person in our showroom.
Where do you see the biggest holes right now in that flow?
The biggest holes, I think, are still, you know, just kind of what I was talking about as far as intent goes, and the guesses that we make. The other thing is, you know, it has to, the more we have people, I don't want to say allow, because we should be providing that, not allowing it. But the more people do online, the more prepared our customer-facing team has to be able to respond to those. So some of it is in speed to response. Some of it is how we answer chats. Do we allow our chat bot to take over and start asking people for a name, even though they filled in names and contact information on a form already as they're progressing through digital retailing? There's some disconnects that make things uncomfortable for a customer and become roadblocks to building their trust, which is what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to build their trust so they want to come in the store and do business with us. I'm not trying to sell a car online yet.
Right.
I am trying to bridge that, create a bridge between the digital, the online experience, and the in-person showroom experience. So the more roadblocks we can take away from that, and the more we can build trust, provide information, and move that customer down the path, the better off we are.
100%. So, past 3 months have been kind of weird at the dealer level. How have you guys adapted, post COVID-19?
Well, we're not post COVID-19 yet, right? And we're probably
How have you adapted
not
since
right?
COVID-19?
We still got a long ways to go with this thing, but 3 months ago, everything was a guess, right? We didn't have any data. So there was no baseline. The decisions we were making were a complete shot in the dark because we'd never been through this before. We've seen things that kind of look like this, maybe 2008 recession and things like that, but we haven't witnessed this thing where, things are normal, and then boom, all of a sudden drop the hat, nothing's normal anymore. And so customer behavior changed, and some of us immediately went old school, right? Banners and pop-ups and all the stuff we know doesn't help the customer journey, but we put them all up. Instead of what we should have done and what we're doing now is putting that information that supports customers' fears, putting that information in line with the customer journey. So getting your digital retailing companies to put those kind of things in line as they work their way through digital retailing, and not just this emergency scream when they first come to the website. But the big important thing now is that 3 months into it, we have data, right? And, I want to echo what George said about events, right? We're blind without them. One of my first gurus in the business world was Brian Tracy, and he always said, what gets measured gets done, right? And the more granular you can get about measuring, the more you can slice things up and really understand what's going on with certain subsets of your customers. Another thing that George said is he talked about this longer path, right? Well, we noticed in May that February and March shoppers were coming back into play, right? So all of a sudden, what used to be 3-day, 3-week customers, now they're 3-month customers. And have we dropped those people out of our CRM follow-up? Have we, what kind of things are we, assumptions that we've kept in place? Now that we have data, go back and look at it. Dig into everything. Dig into your DMS. Did the addresses that people were buying from, did those change? The zip codes? Did the cars they were buying change? Those kind of things. What did you post on social media and Google My Business during the crisis that got engagement? Did you figure out a way to continue those conversations with people and bring those people back into the fold? So we have a whole new set of data now, and our interpretation of it is what's going to drive our success over the next 12 to 18 months while we slowly work our way through this current health crisis.
Yeah, it's such a good point about, in-market shoppers, and, there's no playbook on, what happens to an in-market shopper during a pandemic. So that's smart, just knowing that they're, some of them are just now kind of coming out, from under a rock to get back in the market. So what's, we wrap it up here in the next 5 minutes or so, but what's your, kind of long-term view of digital retailing? Do you feel like it's going to be around? It's a thing to stay. What's your take?
Yeah, I think it's still in the early stages of evolution right now, right? So the first thing was everybody did it, and a lot of people got it wrong, and a lot of companies disappeared. Now we've got some companies that are sticking around and figuring out better ways to do things using their user data to provide a better experience for people. And we're to understand a little bit more about what people want, right? So I'm definitely in the boat of, it's not digital retailing, it's just retailing. We are just extending our services into the online realm to make it easier for customers to make that transition from the digital superhighway to our showrooms.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we'll wrap it up with just a couple of quick Q&As. So I got one for you. We're going to bounce back over to George here. As long as George is still with us. George, you there?
Yep.
All right. So if you had to, pick one, what's the simplest one thing that a dealer can do today to, move the needle? Is it Google My Business? Is it, what would you say today? Just simple thing that most dealers maybe overlook.
I would say, in terms of the one that will drive numbers and opportunity, I would say it's running effective paid Facebook campaigns. Most dealers we encounter overspend in paid search, underspend or misspend in paid Facebook, and also underspend in email campaigns. But really, through the pandemic, Facebook ad prices declined dramatically in March and April, just because ad supply was up, right? More people on devices looking at Facebook, but also demand was lower. And so we saw cost per conversions and cost per click-throughs just dive dramatically. And so that would probably get my vote. And especially now, for folks that are short on new vehicle inventory, work with your paid search provider. Make sure you're not still spending big dollars on new make model campaigns when you may have 1 or 2 units or 0 units, or they may even be running 19s campaigns still. Make sure you inspect those new make model campaigns to make sure they make sense.
Interesting. All right, I got a last question for you, Paul. Does your digital retailing tool integrate with TradePending's data?
You're darn right it does.
Yeah. And and I think that's also an important thing as well, to maybe have a little cohesion there, right, between the things that maybe are lead gen on the site and work harmoniously with your digital retailing platform. So for those listening, if your DR platform doesn't integrate, ask your rep to give me a call, because I'd love to talk to him about integration. So Paul, let me ask you one last question. How does your showroom traffic compare to a couple months ago, like when we were in the middle of it? Is it back up and operating?
I'm the wrong guy to ask about that. Let me tell you why. We had our best May ever on the planet. So we bounced back very, very quickly. Part of that was some of the strategies that I talked about. We didn't automatically assume that people were going to start buying cars online because they couldn't come into the showroom. What we did understand is that people are creatures of habit, and we can see trends in the data, and we did have an understanding that people still wanted to shop. And the change that we had to make was to extend our relationships with those, like I said, where we're used to having 3-day or 3-week conversations with people, that we needed to extend those conversations, and particularly going back to our February, our February and March customers, and helping them get back into market.
Awesome. Well, guys, we're a little bit over time, but I tell you, just to talk with 2 smart folks like you, and for the participants that came on, if you guys aren't friends with these guys on Facebook or in their professional circles, they're really great resources to have. I know Paul's my sounding board for a lot of things that we do over here, and George has just been amazing at giving us valuable insights about our own product. So we're going to wrap it up there, guys. We really appreciate everyone's attendance today. George, Paul, thank you guys so much. And we look forward to doing this again in the future.
Good talk.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.